welcome to Dad Hammer, One for the Road, our short form show where we provide a more focused discussion around specific Warhammer topics. The topic for this show will be getting kids into Warhammer. So whether that's your own children, your grandchildren, younger neighborhood kids that just won't go away, I don't know, or maybe a niece or nephew, just children in general. We're talking about the younger demographic here. So how do you introduce them? What is the best way to introduce them to our wonderful hobby that we have? I know Steve and I both have children, and we've have stories of success and failure of trying to get our kids into Warhammer. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. I am David the Warboss, and I'm joined by the most generic Space Marine in the Imperium, Mr. Medicae Steve. Steve, how we doing?
Doing really, really good, man. I've been looking forward to this episode. This is something near and dear to my heart and yours. Actually, probably the somewhat in a roundabout way, the impetus for this whole podcast that we're doing.
Yeah,
So, yeah, it's going to be nice to talk about this.
for sure. Yeah, we both have stories of how we got started into Warhammer, and ironically, both of us started with our kids. So we've got
Yeah.
the trials and tribulations of all of that, and we thought it'd be a great show starter here for our One for the Road. Thank you so much for listening to our show. If you like what you're hearing, make sure to rate, follow, subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen, and then just tell people uh, about this show. Tell them about what's going on here and what we're doing. We really appreciate it. You can also, of course, find us on our website, dadhammerpodcast.com, and on all our social media sites where we post pictures of our latest projects. So let's go ahead and get started here about getting kids into Warhammer. And Steve, I really wanted to point out, first of all, to our listeners that you wrote a fantastic article on our website that breaks all this down and even, of course, has a picture of one of our favorite movies, The Goonies, on there about the kids riding
Yes.
bikes around. This is not necessarily about kids riding bikes around. This is about kids staying indoors and playing
That's right.
Warhammer, but the article was really, really great. I highly encourage everyone to go read it if you're so inclined. But um, one of the things that you and I both shared at the very beginning was the getting into the hobby. We've talked about this on previous podcasts of how to do that, how to get started. But specifically, you and I share the same experience where I took my son into the Games Workshop store, talking about it on the drive-in. What are we going to do? What's so cool about it? But even then, I think getting into the store, buying models, all that kind of stuff can be a little overwhelming for an adult, much less a child. And if you're trying to get that younger person to go along with you and have the same level of hype, there's a lot of things to consider. Steve, I know that for you, making sure that the child that you're with and for your son, just really focusing on the interest level and ensuring that everybody stays focused about being together. And that's the most important thing in this.
Yeah, and that's kind of where this was the first article that I wrote for our website and doing a blog, and I enjoy writing. I don't do it hardly ever, and it's not a requisite for my job, so I don't really get around to doing that kind of stuff. And I I started writing it, and I was like, it just kind of flowed. I really enjoyed getting to put thoughts out there that rattle in my head, and I think about it. And you and I are of a generation where it feels like things took quantum leaps very fast for us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
When we were kids, as opposed to our kids, if you wanted to talk to your friends, you had to go see your friends. You didn't talk on the phone because everyone else in the house needed the phone,
Right.
especially like adult stuff. So, there just wasn't a lot of that stuff. So you got together, you saw your friends face to face, and you went outside. You did so, or you didn't go outside. Stayed inside. But it wasn't like now. I mean, how many TVs do we have in our homes?
Mm-hmm.
I don't even really want to count it because it's kind of obscene. But when our generation, you had like a TV, maybe two, but you didn't. you didn't sit inside watching TV necessarily. You played games, you did goofy stuff, you played with GI
Right.
Joes,
Right.
and I wanted my kids to always be able to kind of fall back on that. I never wanted them to lose that social skill, you know. Like
Mhm.
there's more out there than, talking to each other on Discord or over a game or whatever, which is fine. I love it because we didn't have that and we would have killed for that when we were kids, you know.
Yeah.
But, I think you can foster that because my son was always interested in old sci-fi movies, Godzilla, Creature from the Black Lagoon, that kind of stuff. And then, the whole Pacific Rim things came out. I don't know if you remember those movies.
Mhm.
It reminded me a lot of the 80s anime cartoons like Voltron and huge stompy robots and stuff like that. So when we went down this rabbit trail of 40K, when I got sort of introduced to it, it all just sort of started weaving and meshing together just so well. And that's the cool thing about the game. And even if not the game, just a hobby in general. You're gonna
Yeah.
meet people, you're gonna talk to people, and you're gonna engage with stuff. And then, it doesn't take a lot to pay attention and see what your kids are interested in, and you can kind of help kind of
Yeah.
foster that out there.
The social aspect, I think, is, you touched on it. The something that we had as kids is the social part of riding your
Hmm.
bikes around. And not to say that people don't do that anymore. I mean, my son still did it. I see
Hmm.
your kids doing it all the time, same thing. And but the social aspect, not just with other kids, but for me as a father, and I know you're the same way, having that connection with your child of something that you're both really excited about. And
Hmm.
I yeah, I'm into video games when the new console comes out, and now my son's old enough, and we get all hyped about going picking up the pre-order.
Oh yeah.
Um, but the same thing with me when we were going to the Games Workshop store is, I'm on their website looking around, and I see cool models, and I start doing lots of research, probably way too much research, going down the rabbit hole. And then, my son peers over the shoulder. "Oh, wow, that's cool. What's
Hmm.
that?" And that starts the ball rolling. And now all of a sudden we're strategizing, in the
Hmm.
car on the way there. What are you going to get? What are you going to get? And I think though that's something that is just so critical to going back to our main topic of getting your child or a niece, nephew, whatever, into Warhammer is really focusing on just being together and sharing an experience of something really cool, getting excited. And as an adult, we've talked about how we're still playing with toys. It's toy
That's
soldiers. And
yes.
but it's an opportunity for you as an adult, for the listeners, for you as an adult to be a child, to be a
Yeah.
kid, and it be okay. And then you can be aligned with your, aged appropriate child, uh, who also is excited about toys, and you can come together on that. And I think it's a cool thing. It's very unique to our hobby, um, which is exciting. I think for anybody that's wanting to pick this up to get their child in. But even then, this whole thing of getting your kids into Warhammer can be still daunting. And I think it's
Yeah.
important, which is our second point here. I think it's very important to start really small. And I started relatively small with just a couple of models,
Yep.
but Steve, and on the website you outlined some tips for our listeners on how do you start small? What does that even mean with an entire store full of product that is literally going to cost you thousands of dollars?
Yeah, I think I expressed some interest, and I believe it was actually at Blackthorn. That was the initial place that I went,
Hmm.
because it was on the way home. I actually went in to get some comic books or something for the kids, and I'd already heard about it and was thinking about the whole Warhammer thing. So I started talking to Mark and Jane, and they're like, "Well, here's a couple of the free little store models they keep around for everybody." So I had two. They gave me two Space Marines, um, and I bought a little pot of McCrag blue because I thought they all had to be blue, and I didn't know my I didn't really know any better. And I took them home, and I already had some hobby stuff from scale modeling and things. And yeah, we just started put them together. They're little push fits, nothing to it,
Hmm.
and started painting. And that's the first step, because if you can't get past that step, I'm not sure, there's much worth having the conversation after
Well,
that.
the one I have a slightly different circumstance because when my son wanted to play Necrons, so I go with
Mhm.
orcs. My son wanted to play Necrons, and he was 10, I think, at the time, 9 or 10
Yeah.
years old, and so we come home and I'd let Daddy try first. So Daddy
Right.
was
Yeah.
going
True
to
story.
put together the model, and I use super glue. I'm like, okay, let's be careful with the super glue. I don't want your mom getting mad that I, you know, allowed my child to super glue his hands together and all that kind of stuff. But putting the models together, and then finally after I figured out how to do it, he wanted to
Hmm.
put the Necrons together. And anyone that's put together Necrons, oh boy, I
Yeah.
mean,
That's not beginner friendly.
no, they're extremely small, and what happened to him is he got very frustrated very
Mm,
quickly trying to put the models together. So one thing, and I think we have slightly different stories, which is okay. But for me and what I went through, my advice to any parent, especially, is if they're gonna pick an army, if your child, if you're gonna let them pick out an army, and they pick out something that is going to be difficult to put together, bring them along, let them
mhm.
try, but also be ready to assemble the entire force for them
Oh,
because they may lose patience pretty quickly.
oh yeah, we devolved right on into that because my son picked Eldar. I
Oh
was
boy.
like, oh boy. I mean,
Yeah. Not much better.
yeah, not much better at all. But anyway, yeah, it was the same situation. Like I looked at it, and I was like, yeah, I don't think you're going to be putting this together. I'll be happy to put it together and let you paint it.
Yeah, the paint, and my son didn't care anything about the painting. Like he's
Hmm.
just, we spray painted the Necrons, uh, the lead Belcher color,
Hmm.
and I said, okay, now you can paint the gun, and he got out black and started painting the gun. I think he got through two models and was like, okay, I'm done. And I'm looking over, you know, and we've got 20 more figures to paint.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, I guess I know what I'm doing before we
Uh,
actually paint and play a game. But I the main thing here, the advice, I guess, is every child, of course every parent says this too, but every child is different. And what I think is appropriate, my advice to our listeners is going to be based solely on my one experience with my son. Yours is going to be
mhm.
different, Steve, and then our listeners, they may have somebody that just goes all in and just can do nothing more to show their excitement than to
That's right.
get in and assemble and paint, and they're just all in. So it may be
Yeah,
different for everyone listening.
I agree with that.
So the after you've gotten your models, let's just assume for the moment that
Yeah,
you've
we made it past it.
managed.
We're good.
They're still in. They haven't super glued their fingers together. Of course, if you use plastic glue, like the Games Workshop recommends, you won't have that. So just remember that my endorsement of super glue is more for me and my fingers, not necessarily
Mhm.
for your children. But after you've gotten that, assuming you've gotten past all of that, you're going to want to start playing a game. And you can go about this two ways. One, as a parent, you're going to absorb all of the rules. You're going to be the beginning and end on the success of this game. And Steve, I tried to go down that road once
Mhm.
myself. It didn't work great because it was a lot of pressure on me, and I wanted to make sure that he had fun. So, I think so did I, went into the store to do a demo, and really
Mhm.
that's the best place to start.
It is for sure. I had looked. I think my buddy gave me. It was an eighth edition core book, so I didn't have the ninth edition when we started. But most of those core rules were very similar. And when you're starting, you just really need to know how to move, shoot, and
Yeah,
do all that kind of stuff.
core
So
stuff.
core stuff, basic mechanics of how this game works. And I was reading through that core manual and I thought, what have I done? I'm like, I don't think I can figure this out. Much less, teach a preteen.
And you're the
Uh,
smart one. You're the
I,
smart guy in the room, right?
that's right. You're the adult in the room, man. Everybody's looking at you. And I remember reading it. I was like, oh, this is going to be really tough. However, went to the Games Workshop store and they've got everything set up. He has done it 100 times if he's done it
Mhm.
once.
Yep.
So he was able to help me as the big man um, get through what was important, what rules were necessary, and how to apply those, and not just read them out of a book. You got a little hands on. So
Mhm.
it very much became a see one, do one, uh, teach one kind of scenario. And it took the pressure off a lot because I was like, oh, well, you can play this with just a bare minimum of rules. And your 10, 11, or 12-year old is going to have a really good time if
Mm.
they're interested in it. And
Yeah.
you're going to have a good time because you're still figuring it out too. So
Yeah.
I think that's important. And whether you can get to a Games Workshop store or not, throw the flare up like we did and I did in the neighborhood. Somebody out there, plays and you don't know they play.
Yeah.
Um, Quite possibly.
I think you'd be surprised too that there's a lot of closet nerds roaming
Yeah,
around,
there sure are.
um, especially into the Warhammer hobby. I was just talking with one of our mutual friends, and he said he was at the dentist, and sorry, he was at the eye doctor, and he said he just wanted to. He was just at the the eye doctor to make sure that he could paint models and see really well to paint those, and the eye doctor said, "Oh, you must play Warhammer 40K. I do too." And I mean, this is
Yeah.
someone, this it's the stereotype goes along with it, but it's a medical professional,
Hmm.
and you would never look at them and say, "Oh, I bet you paint plastic figures in your spare time." No, right? You just
No.
don't think that, but
Mm-mm.
you'd be surprised. So yeah, throw the flare up. Worst case scenario, someone says, "I have no idea what you're talking about," and they look at you weird, but as you get,
Nerds.
yeah, exactly. And as you get older, you get used to that, and you just
Yeah,
roll
you
with it.
do.
But yes, seek out a demo. I think that's really, really important. Those are quick. They're
Hmm.
15, 20 minutes. Honestly, they're a really quick scenario. With that, another piece of advice that I would give, though, is that you got to gauge the interest of the child, because these games take a really long time, and especially if you're playing a 2,000 point game eventually, if you're trying to get
Oh
there, I mean, we're
yeah.
talking 3 to 4 hours. So definitely start small with a starter force, starter
Hmm.
box, recruit edition, all the different ways, a board game, but don't try to go for the 2,000 point army and how cool everything is, because I get it. You want to get to the awesome models, and
Hmm.
your child is so very excited. They want everything on the shelf, but this game is inherently complex, and you're better off getting the demo at the store. But then also, if you're really interested in it, your first purchase should be one of the starter boxes, but the smallest of small. You're
That's
going for
right.
the bare minimum to limp in,
Hmm.
just to get your models on the table as soon as possible. And, Steve, I know that when you started playing, and I've got some ideas for proxying, but when you started playing with your son, it didn't matter to have everything painted to even battle ready standards at that
No,
point.
not at all. And the great thing about the recruit box was all you had to field was, I believe, for one of the simplest missions was 3 Space Marines and I think 5 Necron Warriors.
Hmm.
There was no terrain, there was no anything, and the little recruit book literally gave you step by step what to do.
Yeah.
Like I roll, you roll. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. Man, if you start, even if you were to buy, I know we've plugged the whole combat patrol thing. That's not what we're talking about here. But if you started with a combat patrol box, you'll never get it on the table fast enough to keep your kids' interest.
Yeah.
You need to get just I mean, even if you can just keep it at 10 models between both forces together, something like that. That's achievable. You can even get it out there in gray plastic if you needed to, but you got to strike while the iron's hot. And you got to, like, as soon as that interest is there, you don't want to spend a month and a half or 2 months assembling and painting everything.
Yeah.
And then, because they've moved on, man, they're back into
Yeah.
nerfs or they're back into whatever they
Fortnite,
were. Yeah.
Apex Legends.
Mm-hmm.
My son's now getting into Rainbow Six. He's a little older, but I mean,
Yep.
he's getting into these games with his friends, and I'm a gamer as well, so I'm all about it. Um, but striking while the iron's hot in the sales world. There's a saying, "Time kills all deals," and you really are trying to make a deal. You're trying to
Mm-hmm.
land the deal with your child because they are super excited and they are all in until they're not. And then it's
Till
a
they're
light
not.
switch and you never see them again, you know? So getting those models on the table is part of the interest. And then what I found is that once you get if it's gray plastic and that's it, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just spray paint them. And they may be fine with that, or they may say, wow, like this game is so fun. I really
Mm-hmm.
enjoyed it. Maybe you have a narrative to go along with it. You come up with a cool story or whatever, and they're playing, and then there may pique their interest to, I really want to add some cool terrain, or I want to add
Mm-hmm.
some detail to the bases, or Dad, can we throw some grass or something like that on the base, or can I paint my models this type of color? And the answer needs to be yes, right?
Uh,
This whatever is tapping into that interest for them.
and it's hard because the sticker shock of this hobby is so high. And
Yeah.
I found myself falling into it too. Like, no way, dude. Those models were, that's a 60 or $70 box of models. And I find that, like, you just have to let it go. It's just paint. It can come off one day if you want to ever redo it. But if they want to paint it with, like Lightning McQueen, man, you just got to let them do it. Because, I mean, if you don't, they're gonna be like, boy, Fortnite lets me do anything I want.
Customize.
So, I mean, so it is hard, especially if you're kind of a cheapskate like me, to let go of that aspect. Like, oh, he's going to ruin these really expensive models. It's all
Mm-hmm.
right, man. You're not ruining anything. You're paying for time with your kid,
Yep.
and that's really what you're getting out of it. Not cool looking models.
Yeah, and I've heard when I remember when I first my first child was born, and people would say, because I would talk about, oh man, this is expensive, I got to buy all this stuff, and they would say, well, you can't put a price on a child. Well, number one, that is incorrect. You can 100% put a price on a child.
I have a
It's
spreadsheet to show it.
That's right. It is worth it. Like, I didn't have to buy two of
Uh
everything at the
huh.
grocery store,
That's
before.
right.
But this is just like if you were to go to a sporting event with your kid,
Hmm.
right? You're going to pay for the ticket. You go to a concert with your child, for example. I've got some friends that they love going to concerts and experiencing that. I mean, depending on what kind of band or artist you go see, I mean, that's
Hmm.
a at minimum $100 a ticket. So $200 to go for a 3 or 4 hour event. It's a great experience. You're probably going to have wonderful stories to tell, and it's awesome. But in comparison, you spend $200 in a Warhammer store, and you've got that stuff potentially for years
That's
that
right.
you can do over and over again. So yeah, get over the Ebenezer Scrooge if you can. Um, but that said, with the financial component of it, when I first started playing with my son, he wanted to have different models out there. He wanted the big dogs, the big stuff out there. And
Hmm.
those I was looking at, $150 for that model that I was going to have to assemble and paint myself.
Yeah, that's
And
right.
because he wasn't going to do it, like, well, how about we just proxy? And for my kids, they love Legos. And so,
Hmm.
hey, that's something right there. So I have, and I've told this story on one of our other podcasts, but I have a wonderful picture of a Lego Orc Morkanaut, that my son made for me because I wanted to proxy with it. And he had, I think, 20 Necron warriors that were just Lego minifigures
That's
and
awesome.
on little square bases. And yes, it wasn't exactly the prettiest models in the world, but he made them. We have a great story. And so when a tiny Lego man takes out your orc model that you spent 40 hours on, it's a little
Yeah,
humbling.
it is. I love it though, man. I can picture
It's
that in my
great.
head.
Yeah.
It's really fun.
Yeah. So, I mean, get those models on the table. But when you actually start playing the game, when you really start to get in after you've gotten, again, I think it's important to state if you've gotten this far with your
Yes,
child,
right.
just number one, take it in gates and milestones. But if you've gotten this far and they're ready to play again, maybe you got into a small game, you got a few dice on the board, you had a few models, had a great time. Now we're taking a break to go have a snack or watch Bob the Builder. I don't know,
That's
whatever they watch. It
right.
would be Bob. Hopefully not. I mean, if you have a child that's still watching Bob the Builder and
Probably not playing Warhammer.
intelligent enough to play Warhammer, then you probably need to be looking into some Ivy League schools
Yes,
at this point.
right.
But if you've gotten them into the game, they're ready to go. They want to take the next step, getting more into the rules of the game, reading more into that. I would still highly recommend to play with an abbreviated rule set. Don't
Mhm.
don't try to go for the kill. I mean, to overwhelm your child or the nephew, niece, whatever that you're playing with. And I would also say that the main goal, going back to our very first tip, was to make it about spending time together.
Yes.
Remember, as the adult, it's about spending time with that child and not necessarily about winning or playing quote unquote correctly.
Mhm. Yeah, and you can make the rules however you want. Most kids are not going to sit down and read those codexes and rule books,
Yeah.
so you're safe there. You can, I mean, it's literally set up, move, shoot, die, don't die, and fight, and that's about all you need to like focus on, and on the front end of it.
Mhm.
Um, and yes, so I'm guilty of pulling my punches a good bit.
Mhm.
I'm also guilty of helping my son general his army
Yep.
to his advantage. But I will tell you, they're not dumb. They figure that out real quick. Especially, I mean, they're a little person made of you, and they're living in your house. They know, like, oh, dad's just letting me win. So you have to be careful because I mean, if your kids are anything like mine, after a bit they're like, "Well, this is no fun. If
Mhm.
I want to beat dad on my own accord,
Yeah.
I want to be the winner. I don't want him to help me win all the time.
Yeah. They want some challenge,
They want
and
the challenge.
but it's up to you as the adult to gauge that, to determine when to push, when to pull, when to hold back, when to really press your advantage. And for me, I've my own personal experience, and this is not necessarily the most wonderful memory for me. We were playing, and he had proxied. My son had proxied with on his Necron force with I don't even remember there was a character model, and I was going to shoot it with my orc guns, which are
Hmm.
historically terrible at shooting, and I put all my shots into this one particular character model, and I rolled. It had to be 9,000 sixes. I mean, it just felt like every single shot hit, and then I got to roll for the damage, which was super duper high. He failed all the saves, plus anything that you could, all the bonuses, and I took him out in his first turn before he even got to move that particular character, and he broke down in tears. And man, I
That
that
hurts.
it wasn't intentional. I
Nope.
wasn't trying to do that, but the lesson I would say for any parent in that situation, as I said, look, it's okay. Let's
Hmm.
just, maybe the dice were messed up this time. Maybe I had a really good luck. Just put it back on there. Let's just
Yes.
redo it.
Yes.
Redo it. Let's just keep going.
Hmm. Here's your mulligan.
Yeah, yeah. Give out mulligans freely, and
Hmm.
I think you will keep that child still in the game, even though they know that you pulled. Okay, well, I didn't really win because
Yeah.
the adult took away this or let me have this one back, but that's okay. You just let it ride, and ensure that the child stays in the game, stays interested, and most importantly, stays happy and excited with it.
Yeah, I like to tell my son, we're doing this for science. We're just gonna see what would have happened.
Yeah, it's all statistics.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and then finally, the very last thing, and as we wrap up the show here, as the adult, make sure that you stay patient. Be
Mhm.
prepared for their lapses in interest. My son would always want to take breaks and stop and get a snack
Yep.
or go look at something. Oh look, a squirrel, right? I mean, that's just be okay with that. Be patient. Be prepared to break the game up and to come back later. All of that's okay. And, if you do all of this stuff, and again, every child's different, but if you follow these tips, and definitely go check out the article on our website for some more, but follow this, we think that you'll be able to get your child into Warhammer, and at least for a good, what, 15 minutes?
Something
That's
like
the
that.
start.
And maybe 2 month gaps in between. Who knows?
Maybe, yeah, 15 minutes every 2
Eh,
months is a
yeah,
start. So,
it's something.
well, hopefully this is helpful to all you parents out there, guardians, friends, or people that just hang around neighborhood kids, and that's okay too. Um, we hope that your getting kids into Warhammer quest ends in success. Thank you so much for listening. That'll wrap our episode of One for the Road. And thank you, Medicae Steve. I am the War Boss, and we'll see you next time on Dad Hammer.
Take care, everyone.